as Bobby Moore lifted the World Cup at Wembley, the summer of 1966 became the stuff of legend. We were on top of the world. The euphoria still hasn't worn off 50 years later. In that moment, Britain went from grainy black and white to glorious technicolor. And across the country, people's lives were doing the same.
We love talking about many, many subjects, but here's something. 1966. It was such an exciting time. What were you doing?
Revolutionary times without a doubt.
If I wanted to have sex with someone, I just had sex with someone. I didn't really bother to get clearance from anyone.
Did you take drugs? Did you do blueies?
Would you call keep awake pills drugs today?
Do you remember the World Cup? Men in short shorts. Oh, happy days.
That's me there. I used to score with a lot of girls.
It was a golden moment for Britain, the peak of the 60s wave. But what was life really like at the time?
The big problem in those days for me was my sexuality, because it was illegal. So you live a lie. 66, I was living a lie.
We were caught between the old world and the new.
I honestly never felt at any time during 1966 secure. And one was just sort of hoping, digging in until something good came along.
It's interesting, isn't it? 1966. Give us a ring.
We all remember the World Cup final, but what about the other 364 days of the year? The real revolution of 66 was happening far away from the football pitch, in the lives of a new generation who would shape modern Britain. As the bells struck 12 and 1966 began, 23-year-old Chris and 18-year-old Linda were seeing in the new year in central London. They had no idea what was just around the corner.
To celebrate New Year's Eve, I went with some friends to the Blind Beggar pub. A few of the lads that we'd met took us back to the train. We happened to be talking about where we were going, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to Barking." And they both said, "No, you're not. The train's going the wrong way." And I went, "Oh, no." Chris said to me, "I'll take you home if you like."
I was shy, to be honest, very shy. It was meeting Linda that brought me out of myself. So for me to have picked up Linda the way I did was totally out of character. So something must have happened, mustn't it?
Chris wasn't the only one who was feeling more confident. The grey post-war days of the 1950s were being swept away by a new generation determined to live a very different kind of life. 21 years on from the end of the war, modern Britain was coming of age.
I was aware that things were changing, usually through music.
Everything was different from the way Ma and Paul and Uncle John and Uncle Bill done it.
It was a freedom in the 60s because we had nobody to follow. There was no the generation before.
The older ones would stay at home, I should imagine, but the youngsters thought it belonged to them.
You know, if you wanted to do it, you did it. If you wanted to wear whatever you wore it. So they were there to enjoy, you know, so I did. We did.
Yeah, we did.
In 1966, over 40% of the population were under 25, including every member of the Beatles and the Stones. In just a few short years, British pop music had conquered the globe and inspired a huge shift in attitudes at home. Time magazine declared the capital to be swinging, and it certainly seemed to be true.
London in 1966 is the equivalent of Florence during the Renaissance or something. It's like the peak, the place to be, and I was there.
Much of London was still bomb-damaged and swathed in smog, but in the very centre was a splash of colour. Soho. Fashionable Carnaby Street was the destination by day, but after dark, there was only one place to be seen for the true music fan, a rough and ready basement club called the Flamingo.
Well, the thing about the Flamingo was it was really packed and sweaty. It was a really hot atmosphere. There was a bit of art edge to the Flamingo, a bit of a dodgy gangster vibe about it. It was fabulous.
Run by Johnny Gunnell and his brother Rick, the Flamingo often stayed open until dawn. In '66, Eddie Tantan was playing trumpet for Georgie Fame's house band, the Blue Flames. Though sometimes it was more than just music keeping the party jumping.
The raids. The red light would come on in there, and everybody throw it on the floor.
I got jailed that one of those nights. He arrested me, took me to West End Central.
Yeah.
They searched me. I had £600 on me.
Yeah,
£600.
yeah.
Huh? Purple Heart dealer.
Yeah. The whole of London now. Where else could you find a club like the Flamingo?
No.
Nowhere. There wasn't even one that was close.
For the 23-year-old GI Geno Washington, the Flamingo was like a second home.
It's got a great vibration in there. What you need, an American away from home. It's just slow righteous music.
The Flamingo was soon to give Geno his big break.
I went and asked Georgie, could I sing a song with your band and you? He said, can you sing? I say, sing? Well, my sister is in Martha and the Vandellas, and my auntie is Dinah Washington. Of course, I'm lying. You know, I'm lying my tail off. They started up, and I hit that singing, man, and the house was rocking, man, you know. I was very popular with the ladies, you know. Yes, I didn't have to beg no more.
On the edge of Soho, 19-year-old Janet was in her first year of architectural school, one of only a handful of girls in her year.
And I'll go see Georgie Fame. That's in my diary. That's rated as just about as important as everything else. Go to see Georgie Fame, the Flamingo, 9th of July. 11th of July, start work Wembley, 4 weeks. Yuck. By the summer of 1966, the college said we have to have work experience. We had to work in a real architect's office. I thought, oh my God. It's real people. Anyway, my father, he pulled a load of strings to get me a job as a temporary architectural assistant. And he said, for Christ's sake, whatever you do, don't embarrass me. And I turned up at their offices in Wembley High Road in a very, very short mini skirt with the silver hair. And they asked me if I was the new secretary. I went, no, I'm the new architect. I just looked ill. To add to everything, it was the World Cup. England were at Wembley. You couldn't get in or out or anywhere near the building. It was like World Cup fever, including with my dad. And all I was doing was sitting in an office trying to draw a bloody sports centre. I've actually found 2 of my pay slips. JV Ball, 23rd of July. This is 1966. So I'm a temporary architectural assistant. Blah, 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 tax. Net, £10.16. No wonder I made all my own clothes.
"Oh, is it?" He said, "Yes, it's really good, you know." And I think he made some kind of remark, "Well, if you're helping making them, girl, they're bound to win."
The boots were being made for the German brand Puma, and once finished, they were shipped off ready for the England team's first match.
It was magical, I think. I was young, and it was just really nice to be part of something that was so important at that time to our country, you know, because we'd had the really dark days when I was a child, just after the war, and then you've got this really nice golden era. You were a lot more free than you had been in the past, I think, and it was just nice to be able to be part of something that was national.
Young women were feeling these new freedoms most keenly. Though many still married young, new opportunities were starting to open up. Even outside of the big cities, things were changing. In Cornwall, 20-year-old Secretary Gwyn Haslock had taken up the new sport of surfing.
This is the first beach that I surfed in a competition in 1966. I had to enter with the men because there was no lady competitor. So as far as I was concerned, we were just surfers. From '66, it was really the start of the whole way of life.
Gwyn caught that revolutionary wave and never looked back. She went on to become our first female surf champion.
Having an older brother who's 4 years older than me, he was a very good surfer, so whatever my brother did, I wanted to do as well.
50 years on, Gwyn still surfs most days.
I just like to get out in the water as much as I could. And I'm one of these people, if the surf looks good, get in there. And it's just freedom, really, from everywhere else.
But on Valentine's Day, we went into London to see The Sound of Music, didn't we?
We did.
We had a lovely evening, and we came home on the train, and we went back to your house, didn't we? And
I think you said...
I was certainly getting ready to propose, but...
You said to me, "Will you?" And I said, "Marry you? Yes!"
Linda got it out first. It was the 14th of February, after
That's
all.
right. It was 19.
% of couples who got married in 1966 hadn't lived together before their wedding. But attitudes were changing fast. The BBC even produced this documentary about the thorny issue of cohabitation.
I think a lot of young people who live together do it for kicks, do it to be smart and because it's a kind of in thing to do. There'll probably be a great big swing of the pendulum when the children of this generation will go back to being frightfully Victorian.
Well, that didn't turn out to be true. Sex was here to stay.
Everything was talked about in a way it hadn't been about 5 or 6 years before. I remember buying my first condom. in London. You know, I was terrified. And I went to this shop, just said Durex in enormous letters. I thought, well, that must be okay there. I didn't just want to go into a chemist. I said, could you tell me, condom, please? Excuse me, this is a bookshop.
I mean, I managed to lose my virginity about, I think it was about 15. It took a lot of doing. I had asked someone before and they weren't very keen because I was so young. And I was really curious, but that was it. It was like job done.
Not everyone was so keen to dispatch their virginity. In Skegness, Terry Channon was 21 and starting the holiday season as a redcoat at Butlins. It was still a popular family destination, but by 1966, the camps had acquired a bit of a reputation.
I got the contract to go to Butlins, and Mum and Dad were not really happy about it. And one of my really good friends, her mum, said to my mum, you shouldn't let her go to Butlins, it's only tarts and slappers who go to Butlins, and she'll come back pregnant. My mum was mortified and it really, really hurt her and upset her. And so I think with that, that was probably in my mind that I wasn't ever going to let that happen. I wasn't ever going to let my mum and dad down.
My cousin had a baby out of wedlock, and that was absolutely frowned on. I always remember walking down the aisle with a rather large bouquet of flowers in front of an off-white dress covering the bump.
Dave Manville was 17 and living at home in Sheffield.
I know people that did get their girlfriends pregnant, and some of them either kept the child or they were adopted. Having been in that position myself, I remember going home and saying to my mum and dad, I've got a girlfriend pregnant, and my dad said to me, what are you going to do? So I just said, oh, I'm going to marry her. And he just carried on, that was it.
The pill had become available in 1961, so you might think that everyone was over it by 1966, that the fear of pregnancy had faded into the past. But the truth is rather different. By 1966, there were still fewer than 500,000 women actually on the pill. It was expensive, hard to get hold of, and for some, morally questionable.
The doctor would turn around and ask you, had you not got any morals? And they would try to convince you that you were morally wrong in wanting contraceptive aid. You couldn't go to a doctor for advice. I'm not quite convinced you wouldn't get it.
GPs were instructed to only prescribe the pill to married women, with the written permission of their husbands, of course.
Why couldn't I have sex with whoever I wanted? Why should someone else decide? I still get angry about it.
With no access to the pill and still doing her A-levels, Janet discovered she was pregnant. Abortion was illegal, but backstreet practitioners were commonplace.
I realised I was pregnant and there was no pill or anything then. And someone told me about somewhere I could go in Camden Town or Kentish Town, and the woman would do it for 25 quid. I waited till a weekend when my parents had gone away, and I phoned this woman up and I went up there. I don't really want to go into details, but it wasn't very pleasant. And I came back to Perivale and I lost a lot of blood, but I was fine. And then just went back to school on Monday. Actually, I can't tell you it affected me mentally. I just felt a huge sense of relief. I mean, obviously now you think, oh my God, you're letting this woman, you know, do stuff to you with washing up liquid or whatever it was. God knows what it was. But I had tried before to take pills. You used to go to these chemists around Leicester Square and ask for this, that and the other, but they didn't work.
An estimated 100,000 illegal abortions were carried out every year during the 60s. A bill to legalise failed in 1966, but was finally passed the following year. It didn't change the country overnight, but gradually women began to have more control over their bodies and their lives. Back in Barking, anticipation was building for the big event. No, not that one. Chris and Linda's wedding.
We got married on June the 16th.
The 11th.
June the 11th, yes, June the 11th.
And then we went to Stratford-on-Avon for our honeymoon.
Yes. We stayed in a hotel.
But somebody had bought a book with him.
Had I?
Yes. He always did things right, and he still does. And he always did things by the book. And we sat in bed with a book, telling us exactly how to do it.
I do not remember this. I do not remember this.
You used to be able to go into the chemist and there'd be a stand of books on hemorrhoids and diabetes and having a baby. And one of them was on sex.
Sex manuals were a thriving market in 1966, and a happy marriage promoted as the cornerstone of respectable adult life. Over on the Wirral, 19-year-old Pete Price realised that his own feelings about sex were not being explained in a pamphlet.
When I started to feel the way I felt, I didn't know what I was feeling. You know, it wasn't talked about. It was still a criminal activity. It was illegal to be gay.
In 1966, being gay could feel like a life sentence, and that wasn't far off the truth. If caught or even suspected of homosexuality, you faced a prison term.
I lived a lie. I lived a lie. I went out with girls. I dabbled with a couple of pals who were experimenting with sex. But it was a lie. The whole thing was a lie because I was frightened.
When you got married, were you consciously aware of the fact that you were marrying somebody with homosexual tendencies?
No, I was marrying somebody I loved, and that was it.
This woman married a homosexual. Twice during their marriage, he was arrested for importuning. The second time, he killed himself rather than face the punishment of a court and the disgust of his friends.
Still living at home with his mum, Pete had to be careful to hide his secret.
I came home one Thursday night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and my mother was lying in bed, and normally she wasn't awake, and she had a letter in her hand which had fallen out my bureau, which was referring to other guys. And my mother said, "What's this?" And she was white as a sheet, and I was white as a sheet, and I thought, it's got to be done. And I said, "I'm a homosexual," to which she was physically sick, absolutely distraught. She cried herself to sleep for 3 years.
There wasn't so much a gay scene in Liverpool as a gay pub. The magic clock offered Pete a rare opportunity to let his guard down, once he made it inside, that is.
So this was the area where it was all happening, and the magic clock was about here. It was a small pub, but we had to be careful when we went there because of the theatre, because all the people coming out of the theatre, if they saw you, what were you doing? Going into a gay bar? You couldn't go into a gay bar, and it was really weird. So we would wait outside, and then somebody say, "Now, come on in."
Gay life was so well hidden in '66, most people didn't know it existed.
What was gay? No idea. We didn't come part of the game. You know, the biggest stars in the world may have been gay, but we didn't know. We didn't really care. Not the era I'm talking about, not 66. Maybe in sophisticated London, maybe, but not in Sheffield.
Like Liverpool, Sheffield was a city of macho men and heavy industry.
Sheffield was a tough city, steel and tough people, a peculiar mix of everything, because it was still the old Sheffield. The steelworks were still there.
Yeah, you were factory fodder. When you failed your 11 plus, that was it. Nobody wanted to know.
The Beatles may have made working-class accents cool, but the majority of work available in Sheffield was still hard manual labour. Peter Stringfellow had found his strengths lay elsewhere and got a job as a door-to-door salesman touting carpets to housewives.
I could talk. I hadn't changed too much. I could talk, which transferred into being a salesman. I didn't know what a salesman was. I just would talk to people about what I was trying to sell them, and somehow it worked. But that also got me into trouble. And I actually transferred some stock from the company I was working for into my car, which became mine, and I mixed it up, their stock with my property. In other words, I was stealing their carpets. And I started selling those for cash, knocking on doors and selling them. And I went, wait, this is a lot of money. Then someone reported these carpets going missing, and I went to court. And the magistrate decided I needed teaching a lesson. I was 20 years old, just married. My wife was pregnant, and he really sussed me. So he sent me to prison for 3 months. I thought that was the end of my life. That was me finished. You can't come out of prison in those days and get a job. You were finished. There was no, like, give this boy a chance, you know, no. They liked me. I had 3 or 4 they liked me, but no way was they going to give me a job.
Michael had left Sheffield for Cambridge University a few years earlier, but was still very involved with the fortunes of the local football teams.
Sheffield Wednesday were in the cup final. This meant more to me than the World Cup in any shape or form. We were coasting home, and suddenly Everton, we were playing, scored 2 late goals. Absolute disaster. I felt absolutely mortified. And I'm a Sheffield United supporter. This was Sheffield Wednesday, but it was just because I was from Sheffield. I wanted them to win in World Cup year.
The FA Cup had whet our appetites. Television sets were flying off the shelves as we got ready for the World Cup. For the first time, the matches would be broadcast live, and by the summer, 9 in every 10 homes owned a TV. The growing popularity of television provided Michael with his very first job, presenting a new youth show, appropriately called Now.
The ordinary pop show, Ready, Steady, Go and Top of the Pops, had sort of led the way, but there was something more now. So I was there really to do little comedy links, and I happened to be able to do a Harold Wilson accent. Hello, good evening, is your Prime Minister here? And the rest of it was doing all sorts of strange things. I remember acting with a wonderful actor called Arthur Mullard. We did a piece where I'm playing dun 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 and end up smashing the piano in the middle of a field. So whatever the guys wrote, I would have to do these little sort of links.
Anarchic television was proving popular, and it wasn't long before a new opportunity came along for Michael.
Quite out of the blue, BBC rang up and said, we've got this new series called The Frost Report. It's going to have a theme to it each week. David Frost is going to present it. There are going to be sketches. We've got a cast of 10 new performers. Ronnie Barker, Ronnie Corbett, a man called John Cleese you might have heard of. I said, oh yes, I've heard of him from Cambridge.
Does it hurt you if I do this? Of course it does, I mean. Why, you see, it hurts.
And we would like you to submit material.
A new kind of comedy was being born. The Frost Report brought together all the British Monty Pythons for the very first time.
The first thing we sold to them, the 2 Ronnies did it, was just a policeman coming in and saying,
Good morning, Super.
Morning, wonderful.
It was a very silly thing. The embers were burning.
Television was changing as quickly as we were. In 1966, the BBC even announced the move to colour broadcasting. But this radical innovation didn't apply to the colour of the people appearing on it.
It was completely dominated by white people. And when they saw a black face on the television, they used to call everybody and say, come, come, there's a black person on the television. Well, a coloured person on the television.
Nina Baden-Semper became a huge star in the 70s, appearing in the frankly quite racist sitcom Love Thy Neighbour.
Perhaps you ought to call next door and introduce ourselves to our new neighbours.
Oh, come on, let's get settled in first, huh?
Well, you know, I can't help feeling that we are going to come as a surprise to them.
If you ask me, I'd say it'd be more of a shock.
But back in 1966, she had arrived from Trinidad and was struggling to find work.
There weren't many parts written for women, for a start. Therefore, there weren't many parts written for black women. So it was, you had to take whatever there was in those days, you know. You didn't have a choice, really. There weren't very many black people around, so it was difficult for them to identify with us, you know, because they treated us with suspicion because of the color. They didn't know. It was ignorance.
In 1966, a new sitcom appeared on our screens that captured that ignorance perfectly. Till Death Us Do Part.
I mean, the ones that I'm talking about, they're your proper blacks, ain't they? The ones that was born in the jungle, your natives. I mean, don't tell me they're educated. Half of them are still eating each other.
Oh, devil. Talk some ruddy nonsense, a pair of them.
Oi, that's enough of that. All that swearing, I won't have it. What's the matter with these nails, then?
The programme quickly became the most watched show on television. The irascible Alf Garnett and his bigoted racist tirades drew an incredible 60 million viewers an episode. Though Till Death Us Do Part was intended as satire, it certainly reflected some very real attitudes of 1966.
I got a lovely story from my sister, actually, who was a nurse, and the surgeon said to her, "Oh, Miss Baden-Semper, how come you speak such a good English?" And she said, "Well, the Englishman lived in the tree next to mine."
That's good.
Yeah. How did you find that, Geno, black-white thing in those days?
No,
How did you pack it?
Well, I just,
went with
like
the flow.
most GIs, stayed away from the whites. It's,
Yeah.
You know, it's just trouble. It's going to cause trouble and all of that. And you go somewhere where blacks hang out.
As a matter of fact, in England, you have a country of variety, the changes of the season, and it has entered into the people themselves. Yet, the Englishman, or the white man for that matter, doesn't want the variety of the human species. He likes to see white only.
Okra. Not gentleman's finger, not man's finger. Thank God somewhere the women got the preference.
Yasmin and Parveen had been teachers in East Africa and found work at a local school, changing quickly with the influx of new faces.
I used to volunteer to sit with the kids, only to eat the dessert, because I loved the English, you know, puddings and all those things. Spotted Dick with the custard. Everybody was talking against school meals, but we loved them, isn't it? Because it was a change for us. The first school I taught was Medway Junior School, and that is myself on this side here. And you can see the diversity at that time because of the influx of the immigrants. One of our friends who was a doctor, and he was having problem because the health visitors were not allowed in the homes of the women who had just delivered a baby because they were suspicious why this woman is coming. They had no idea that that's part of the system here. So he then remembered that these two sisters can speak their language, and we suggested that because we can't expect these women who had never been to school in their life to learn English straight away, but we thought if the health visitors can pick up a few greeting words and build the bridge. So I had to teach Urdu in 1966 to the health visitors, like Assalamu alaikum, aap kaisi hain, you know, very friendly words. And then they went to these homes and they would come and greet them. And the women were, oh, Urdu, that you can speak Urdu. Oh, come, come, come. And they would let them come in. And then the problem was they wouldn't let them go because that's the Asian culture, you know, until they fed them so much. You never got it.
Dave and Paul were working for the electricity board and the department store C&A, but they were at the club every night it was open. Paul even got a job painting psychedelic murals on the wall.
66, it was a whole world for me. Tuesdays, Thursdays was records. Friday, Saturday, Sunday could be live music, live band. We got all the top London acts that we would never have seen in Sheffield. So we got everybody, Rod Stewart, Elton John.
The Kings, Pink Floyd, and on it goes. The Who was so loud, I think you could have heard them in Peterborough.
What do you reckon was one of your favourite nights in the Mojo?
One of the I remember is the Small Faces. And I'll tell another one, the Benny King. You know why? Because he invited me.
Sang.
More and
You
more.
sang.
I sang with him, yeah. I sang with Benny King and I can't sing. It gives you a little idea how big that stage was, remember?
Well, couldn't figure out how little Stevie Wonder and his orchestra.
And his orchestra.
And
the
I Can
dancers.
Tina Turner and their big band.
And the Ikettes.
And yeah, how they all fit on.
When the groups weren't playing, you had to fill in time. I had a Piccadilly sandwich eating competition. I'd have dancing competition, anything to keep them focused. Because if you didn't, a fight would start. A fight would start, bang, bullet, crash, and it would only stop when your group came on.
The King Mojo didn't look like any club you'd see today. A suburban house on a residential street, but it became the beating heart of the music scene in Sheffield, and Peter was the king.
We'd invented all-nighters, which came from London, a club called the Flamingo, which had all-nighters with all the blues boys. And we were booking some of the biggest soul names in the world for 4 o'clock in the morning because there was nobody else to book them. Of course, for the few years I was there, the neighbours were going mad.
They thought there was the almighties. That's how the Stringfellows worked. They just wanted to push everyone around. They didn't think about the children or the old people or anyone else or the residents.
The police soon had Peter in their sights again. He was back in court, this time to try and save his club.
Everyone outside gets an idea that it's nothing but a dirty cellar, and in fact it's just a wonderland for young people. They've got to come inside to assess this. Even the magistrates never came in. Nobody's interested, that's all. They just want to get rid of the mojo, and that's it.
The story goes that the guy was breeding budgies next door to the yard as you come into the Mojo Club. And when we went to court, and I was asking for a licence, and they were opposing, and he went up in front of the magistrates, and he actually said, this guy, look, I've been breeding budgies all my life. Since that Mojo's had the all-nighters, all those eggs are cracked. We've never had a new budgie. And the magistrate went, oh, it's terrible. And they turned the licence down. I blamed the budgies.
The authorities may have been clamping down, but the genie was out of the bottle. The morals and attitudes of the older generation were fast becoming a thing of the past.
After 6 months of marriage, my husband became allergic to
the latex.
Which
So I
is-
could no longer use condoms.
We had to start using the pill. And my mum said, it's no good going to see your doctor here because she's Catholic and she won't prescribe the pill. So you went to your doctor, didn't you? And he said, tell Linda to come to me and I'll prescribe it to her, although I wasn't on his list. and so I didn't get pregnant.
Chris and Linda weren't the only ones looking for medical advice. In Liverpool, Pete and his mum had booked an appointment with their GP.
Well, we went to the doctor because it was seen as a medical problem. The doctor informed my mother that I could be cured of being a homosexual. There was a treatment. If I went to a mental institute in Chester, they put me into this place with a false name, which I had to have a false name, because I was a criminal. And then the big day came when I had to have my treatment. And what they did was they recorded me talking about sex for an hour on a Grundy TK20, the old tape recorders, always remember that. And they would ask me everything about sex, but using the graphic description. They then put me in a room with no windows, with a male nurse, and I was in a bed, and I had magazines, dirty magazines. And then they asked me what I drank. I drank Guinness in those days, so there was cases of Guinness. So I listened to the tape, drink the Guinness, and look at the books. And halfway through the hour, they injected me, which made me vomit, and also made me go to the toilet. I sat in my own excrement and my own vomit, and that lasted an hour. And then they did it again, and again, and again. And for 72 hours, there wasn't much left of me at the end of it. I wasn't being cured of being gay. All I was lying there thinking, I am never going to be seen again alive because nobody knows I'm in here because I'm under a false name. I will never, ever get out of here. And I was really, really frightened. That's all I was thinking of. So I said, I want out. And from that day onwards, I said, enough is enough. I've got to try and accept who and what I am.
Mod, rocker, moon maiden or dandy, your clothes told the world who you were in 1966. Fashion had exploded into a sea of colour and combustible nylon.
I can't believe I walked down the street in Liverpool in a pair of blue leather hot pants with Mickey Mouse braces and a leather cloak. And I didn't think I was gay. I thought I was getting away with it. I really shake my head in disbelief at what I got away with.
Pete wasn't the only one stretching his sartorial wings. Let's be honest, we were all dressing like lunatics. Well, apart from Chris, maybe.
You had a knitted tie?
I had a knitted tie, yes.
I can still see the knitted tie.
It was the same width all the way down, with a square end.
Well, I was probably just on the transition from corduroy to jeans, you know?
I looked fantastic in 1966. I used to wear all the modern clothes, and my favourite shop was Bieber. Well, here's a little Bieber dress. Very nice, very simple. So revolutionised the whole thing. Very clever lady. I loved Bieber.
They've always produced nice swimsuits, I think, it's the 60s. They were quite fashionable, weren't they? And the bathing hats, they were very flowery.
Lots of hair, lots of eyelashes, the traditional iconic Twiggy look. Very short skirts, but my legs were better then.
They had bikinis, but not me, because I've always been quite buxom, as I would say. And if I dived under a wave, the bikini wouldn't be there at the top anymore. So I never liked bikinis. It would be off.
Here's another one with a short skirt. And we always had to wear boots with it because of the fashion in those days.
We just thought we could do anything. We were so cocky, it was unbelievable. And I just thought, well, I might have funny teeth and glasses, but, you know, I look great. But we did look and dress outlandish.
And if you really wanted to look unique, well, you had to break out the needle and thread.
From the age of 14, I'd always made loads of my own clothes. And I didn't want to look like anybody else. I made myself a silver leather coat, and it just looked fabulous.
Janet's silver jacket was soon to land her a part in a legendary film of '66. Set in swinging London, Blow Up follows a young mod photographer in a world of fashion, pop music and easy sex. The Italian film director Antonioni was looking for extras at Janet's university.
He needed to shoot in a nightclub, and he was using Jeff Beck and the Yardbirds to play in the nightclub. So he needed a lot of London trendies. Antonioni picked me out, and I got to dance with this black guy, and we got extra money. And I remember the others got the hump because I got action money. The others had to stand around, and I was like dancing.
'66 may have been swinging for London singles, but in Leicester, Yasmin realised that her sister's arranged marriage was in trouble.
And when I came here, it was like a grey cloud everywhere, and I thought, what's happened to her, you know? I mean, this is not normal.
It was great to have her. If she wasn't there,
we wouldn't be here today.
Yasmin arrived to discover that her Indian brother-in-law was living with another woman and had been for years.
my husband wasn't with me, he was with an English woman. I didn't know. When I came, I found out. He never stayed with me.
And in fact, I went to see him.
She saw him. She said, he's not good for you. Just forget him and leave him.
In 1966, Parveen did something unheard of in the Asian community. She filed for a divorce.
Muslim women, it was unheard. But what my husband, ex-husband, thought, she will not do anything, so I'll have English and Asian. That's what he had in mind. But I said, no way. I'd rather be alone than have as a second wife. And I took the very difficult decision, but I did.
I think we set the precedent after that, didn't we? A lot of Muslim girls started coming out of the deadlock, you know. They realized that you can do it. You know, you can't just suffer while the man is having another woman on the side.
Perhaps naive and romantic to believe that we were about to transcend and to sweep over the old sectarian divides because we were young, cool, international people. Sadly, it wasn't to be, but it was a very attractive idea at the time, for me anyway.
Inspired by the civil rights demonstrations in America, the students saw that peaceful protests could have a huge impact.
There was a tendency always sort of within the Catholic community, I mean, to see ourselves as the equivalent of black people in the United States. The Martin Luther King speech would have been listened to and read and celebrated as much, I think, by young people in Northern Ireland as by anybody outside the Afro-American people themselves.
In 1966, the threat of violence in Northern Ireland felt very far away. In fact, the province had the lowest crime rate in the whole of the UK. The peace didn't last long. In the May of '66, a loyalist paramilitary group called the UVF reformed amid rumours of a resurgence of IRA activity. By June, they had killed 2 Catholic civilians, John Scullion and Peter Ward. For Eamon McCann, the killings seemed like the last gasp of the old sectarian ways. But others saw what was to come.
My Aunt Sissy said to me when we were marching for civil rights, very, very early days, she said, son, if you keep this up, we'll be burned out of our house. Huh? She says, we'll be burned out of our house if you people keep up this marching in the streets and causing trouble. Yeah, I thought she was right. She was burned out of her house just a couple of years later.
The Divis Flats became an iconic image, not of progress, but of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Those shots fired in '66 would echo for another 30 years. America was influencing Britain in other ways too. In London, Geno was finding that his new career as a soul singer was perfectly timed. Black American artists were now leading a charge on the charts.
Geno Washington and the Ram Jam Band.
Geno and his Ram Jam Band had become the hottest live act in town.
You don't know like I know, oh, what that woman never done to me. 'Cause in the morning,
Geno, they became the biggest act ever to draw a crowd at the Mojo Club. We could play him once a month, no problem.
It cannot be denied. We was the best house rocker. Geno, Geno, Geno.
Geno's reputation as an electrifying live performer meant that the Ram Jam Band were playing high up on the festival bills that summer.
I just got me some new clothes out of Cornerby Cabin, off Cornerby Street here. I'm going to the festival. I'm looking sharp. I'm feeling sharp. And we get there, the crowd dragged me out of the van and put me on their shoulders, right? Now, my trousers are all split. My butt is hanging out and everything, you know what I mean? They're carrying me through the audience. About 100 yards there. And you got the small faces. They're playing, right? Steve Merritt's doing his thing and everything. And so when they put me up on the stage, he says, all right, you want the nigga? You can have it. Hey, it didn't bother me. You know what I mean? I was worried more about my trousers.
yeah, Geno Washington.
Were one Puma boot and one Adidas. The day of the World Cup final arrived. 32 million Brits gathered around television sets to watch the game. For the eagle-eyed, it looked like a clean sweep for Adidas. But not quite. One key player was wearing Puma boots.
I think the only
person that actually wore those boots was Gordon Banks, which was the goalkeeper. I know he definitely had Puma boots because I was quite a fan of Gordon Banks. Thought he was quite cute, the goalkeeper.
Year when more than just a football match hung in the balance.
It's the equaliser!
First time I went to London, I got to Euston Station, I took my coat off, put it on my shoulders, got my cigarette holder out, and I minced down the platform, and I was home.
We were taking control of our destiny.
I went home and my mother was shoving washing in the machine, and I just looked at her and I went, well, that's it, I'm off. And I just got a bag of stuff and walked out, and I never went back home after that.
66 put us on the path to the lives we live today.
From number 2 to 5 for 42 weeks.
We were making choices that would shape our entire lives.
Jeff Hurst saw an opening in the defence and achieved the hat-trick.
For Terry and her boyfriend Dave, that day would stay with them forever.
Dave walked me back to my little tiny pokey chalet, and he proposed to me that night. And I think it was because we were just on a bit of a high, really. That was my sort of recollection of the World Cup, was me getting engaged, really. That was far more important to me than the World Cup. It was lovely.
Changed our lives completely. We're where we are today because of 1966, aren't we?
And you won the World Cup.
And West Ham won the World Cup.